So, it's an Applejack episode, huh? This should be interesting. Sarcasm. This episode starts with Applejack searching through what looks like a barn for mementos, while Granny Smith is talking excitedly about the upcoming Apple family reunion. It turns out that at this reunion, all of Applejack's relatives are coming. You know, unlike the last reunion we saw. Oh, and Bab's seat is also coming. Make sure you beef up your security. Granny Smith says that she's going to be really busy getting everything ready, so everyone else offers their help. And then Applejack offers to take over the entire reunion. And for some reason, Granny Smith relinquishes control to her.
You just tell me what the reunion needs, and I'll take care of the rest.
How do you not know? Even if you haven't set it up before, I'm assuming that you're usually a part of this. And you definitely attend. And yes, this is actually a legitimate problem. Granny Smith goes to tell them about the reunion like it's the first one ever. That's more to the audience than anyone else. And that's the feeling that takes over this whole sequence. Unlike in, say, Family Appreciation Day, where Granny Smith was telling her history to school children she's never met before. And then we get this. Yeah, thanks. I wanted more diabetes. While Granny Smith goes through memories that Apple Bloom most likely already knows about, and Applejack definitely does, Applejack starts making a list in her head of what they're going to need. And this brings me to my main problem with this episode. The central conflict is shoehorned. Just by seeing how unawares Applejack is to Granny Smith's stories, we can already tell what's going to happen. She's going to go way overboard and essentially create so many activities that none of her family has any time to interact and create memories. Here's the thing. Applejack is incredibly family-oriented, and should be in tune to the thoughts and concerns of her family. Furthermore, she's not the kind to be locked in her own head and ignorant of the world around her. Wow, Cindy Morrow, you've got the main cast member with the least defined character out of character. Congratulations. Actually, Applejack is probably the only member of the main six where this conflict could not work. Give the story to Rarity. She's built her life around being entirely different to her family. Give the story to Fluttershy, and we'll see how she interacts with her own family. Give the story to Twilight. She's been shown that she doesn't like showing off, but her family has to be proud that she's Celestia's prize student, and it would be the opposite with Rainbow, trying to show off how awesome she is to her family, who would most likely be, at this point, underwhelmed by it. Give the story to Pinkie, and we might learn why she left the rock farm to pursue a life as a baker. Give the story to Applejack, and you need to make her stupid and or ignorant to get the plot to work. Yeah, Applejack's parents are kinda dead. Yeah, it's not really important, so I'm not gonna talk about that. Applejack keeps herself up late into the night, worried about getting the reunion right. The next morning, they start preparing activities for the reunion, and we learn that Applejack has actually learned her lessons from Applebuck season. I would give a point, but continuity should go without saying. Then Applejack's family arrives, and the members of the family are excited to see each other, including Babs and Apple Bloom. Wow, I guess getting tortured by someone brings you closer. And would you believe what happens next? Applejack goes overboard and stops the interactions for activities, completely blind to her family's concern. And believe it or not, that's most of the episode. Don't believe me? Applejack sends all of the kids on an obstacle course that goes on for miles, and then she pretty much turns the rest of her family into an internment camp. She has Granny Smith and her cousins finish a memory quilt that they clearly didn't want to finish, and has other family members we've never met before and don't care about make apple fritters as fast as possible. Alright, let's ignore the shoehorn conflict for a moment. If you wanted this to work, then you should have taken the focus off of Applejack. It'd be a lot more interesting to see her family members get increasingly annoyed or irritated than watching Applejack act like an idiot. But that would upset this episode's intention, wouldn't it? I know why Cindy Morrow isn't leaving Applejack off camera for more than a few seconds. She didn't want to have a repeat of the last roundup, where Applejack was not only upstaged by an appearance from Derpy, but Pinkie's comedic antics. When I first watched this episode, I thought that she wasn't even trying. Now that I'm critiquing it, I realized that she was trying her absolute hardest to make sure that Applejack didn't get overshadowed. But in doing so, Cindy Morrow forgot one teensy tiny detail. Applejack is not interesting. Not in the slightest. I will admit that Applejack is the hardest type of character to write, considering that she's exactly where she wants to be in life. She has no long-term ambitions and no real problems. In order to make her interesting, you have to give her something that conflicts with her lifestyle, like a lottery prize or, say, a servant for life. Or you have to take something away, or at least threaten to. It could be anywhere from her home to her hat. And yes, I would watch an episode where Applejack loses her hat. It'd be a lot more interesting than this dullard. This eventually leads up to a hayride at maximum speed, and then Applejack releases the most generic fantasy creatures I've ever seen. Rainbow-colored fruit bats, which are actually shaped like fruit. One of them sees a fruit hat on one of the relatives, and the whole swarm swoops down on her. Every pony jumps off the hayride in panic, and it crashes into the barn that all the apples were supposed to take a photo in front of.
Up in all the doing, we haven't had a second to enjoy the company of the folks we've been doing it with.
Why didn't you explain that 8 goddamn minutes ago? Applejack decides that in order to fix what she broke, she's going to have every pony else fix up the barn, while she dictates commands in this episode's song, Raise This Barn. I will admit, this song has grown on me a lot since I first heard it, even though the lyrics still leave a lot to be desired. It's just, it feels like this is trying to be Season 3's Smile Song or Winter Wrap-Up. It's nowhere near that good, although at least it has more context than the former. It's not that it just doesn't sound as good either, the visuals aren't as good. In the Smile Song, we had multiple forms of animation where every little detail was accounted for, up to and including Pinky's legs actually moving while she spun around. Winter Wrap-Up was creative with its visuals, using spotlight effects and having ponies appear at the corner of the screen. All that's happening here is square dancing, the least exciting dance ever. Oh, and construction. That's it. At no point did the visuals do anything that couldn't be done outside of a musical sequence, except here, which like I said prior was done in Winter Wrap-Up. Even worse, some of the moments remind me of one of the worst Disney films ever, Home on the Range. I don't know the relationship that the writers have with the animators, but I suggest Cindy Morrow get a better one because this is happening far too often in her episodes. The animation keeps letting her down. The song ends with a photo, and every pony making some kind of memories because manual labor always brings families together.
Applejack, you put on a reunion that every pony will remember.
Just because I remember getting my wisdom teeth pulled doesn't mean it was a pleasant experience. If only there was anything memorable in this episode. This is not one reunion that I'm going to remember for long. What's the worst thing that a creator can do from the creator's perspective, not from the viewer's perspective? It's not to be offensive, or to be bad, or even to be unpleasant. It's to leave no impact. That's the basic point of any form of creativity. If it doesn't get any sort of reaction, then it fails as a product of creativity, which is why things like Dada exist. This isn't Cindy Morrow's worst episode, but it's definitely her greatest failure. That's what I get from this episode. I kept saying it wasn't interesting throughout, but I wouldn't go so far as to call it annoying or boring either. It's just kinda there. Maybe this is the perfect episode for Applejack. A character who will always have my undying apathy until she actually does something. People say that Fluttershy does nothing. Applejack does so much nothing that half the time I forget she exists. Kinda like this episode. Or anything about it, really. If I gave out half stars, I would give this episode a 2.5. But I'm rounding down because at no point did I even see a joke try to work. All this episode wanted to do was give Applejack screen time. Nothing else. And it did succeed in that regard, by giving her her worst episode to date. Yes, I think the Super Speedy Cider Squeezy 6000 is better because I at least remembered things about it. What was I talking about again?